Welcome, Kate Winslet.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's so great to have you here at the virtual Mill Valley Film Festival. I mean, this is a first in so many ways. And we're thrilled to honor your work with this tribute program and with the MVFF Award. So I just wanted to let you know that the award itself is a bronze sculpture, and they're all individually cast and numbered, and it's made by Mill Valley artist Alice Corning. And of course, we're sorry that we can't just hand it to you through the screen in person.
That's wonderful that it's made by a local artist. I didn't know that. That's a really that's a wonderful thing to hear.
Yes.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you.
And via the miracle of international shipping, I'm sure it will get to you one way or the other.
Oh yes, it will. It will do. I'm sure. Well, I look forward to receiving it.
Great. So we'll talk about your career, but also about your newest film, Ammonite, which is a film we got to highlight on the big screen at Mill Valley Film Festival's Drive-In. And I kind of was thinking that...
Oh, wow.
Right?
Drive-In. Oh, that's so great.
I know. And I sort of think that for a film that's so sort of in touch with the elements, it seems kind of great to see it outdoors, right?
That's wonderful, actually. I can imagine... I can imagine the experience of seeing Ammonite, not just outdoors, but also in a little sort of bubble by way of sitting inside your car, because it's quite an intimate, almost private experience, I feel, watching the film. And people have very different emotional reactions to it. And yeah, what a wonderful way to see it. I think that sounds, that we should do some kind of a drive-in premiere in England or something.
Have you ever been to a drive-in, actually?
I have. Very recently, for the first time properly. So I live on the south coast of England, and one of the large local towns had been doing drive-ins in connection with a theatre that is based there, and they just took over the theatre car park and were doing a wonderful series of old classics. And so myself and my husband and the children, my little one, we went and got pizza from Pizza Express, took it all with us, and ate pizza in the car watching Singing in the Rain. And it was it was absolutely wonderful. And of course when the Singing in the Rain number actually came on, my husband and I, we had to jump out of the car. We jumped out of the car, ran to the side of the car park where there were no people, and just did a whole wonderful open air dance together. It was quite romantic and giddy. And, the kids kind of, mortified with embarrassment, but we didn't care. It was really wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah. So because we can't do this in real time, what I did was to write to a handful of people and ask for two things. The one was a question for you, because in real time, we would be able to open to questions, and then also what their favorite film of yours is. And so I'll include some of the questions as we go, but the favorites were really kind of interesting to me. They were sort of all over the place.
Wow.
Eternal Sunshine, quite a bit. Sense and Sensibility, quite a bit. Mildred Pierce, Heavenly Creatures, The Dressmaker, Steve Jobs, Iris, Revolutionary Road, and one person, The Holiday. And then one of the people I asked said she was holding off on naming a favorite until your next project, Lee, because she's interested in Lee Miller. So she was holding off on a favorite till then.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh, well, that's really wonderful to hear. Eternal Sunshine, I would expect, because as the years go by, that film was made nearly 17 years ago now, would you believe it, in 2003. And I got pregnant with my son, Joe, right at the end, and he's turning 17 in December. So I always know the films by the ages of my children when I made them. It's so funny. It was like, was I pregnant then or no? Actually, no. Oh, that was before. Oh, no, wait. Anyway, so it's very funny. People always laugh at me when I somehow am able to recount it in those terms. But Eternal Sunshine is one of those films that it's definitely being handed down through the generations now. And I will often see kids, I'm serious, I will see kids, in grocery stores or out and about. This is obviously all pre-COVID. and they will actually have quotes that Clementine said written all over their forearms and things. It's completely mad. Yeah, it's a famous line. It's become a famous line. And of course, at the time, I just was concentrating on getting the dialect right when I said it. But the line, you know, I'm just a fucked up girl looking for my own peace of mind. Don't assign me yours. It's become a really famous line. And people like to hear me say it and get me to say it and go, oh, I like, you know, it's wonderful to me. And the fact that that some of your members cited Sense and Sensibility just warms my heart so much, because
oh my God, yeah.
I mean, I was only 19 years old. I was the age that my daughter is now. She's about to turn 20, and it was such an extraordinarily special, magical experience. One that every day, honestly, every day, Zoe, I would pinch myself. Couldn't believe that I was there. I couldn't believe that I'd been cast. And in some way I thought, well, perhaps they just read the wrong name off the list and they didn't have the heart to kind of break it to me that actually they'd made a terrible mistake and they meant to cast the other girl who'd already had 10 years of experience. Because I was such a newbie, you know. I'd done Heavenly Creatures and I'd done, that was it actually. I think I'd done Heavenly Creatures and I did another sort of small film that never saw the light of day. And then Sense and Sensibility, and just the people and just being so close to such wonderful, you know, trained actors, because I wasn't trained. So I did feel like a bit of a misfit as well, like this feeling of not really belonging. And it's an interesting thing as an actor. And for me, at least, people so often think that I was trained and come from this kind of acting lineage because I speak very nicely. But that's only because my grandmother went to Italia Conti stage school and she was taught how to speak. And I think it does get handed down from your maternal grandmother, your speech patterns. So my mother always spoke well in turn, and then therefore so did all of us. But actually I had kind of a, you know, very sort of rudimentary, you know, sort of kind of a working class upbringing, and people just never really believe me when I say that. So to be part of Sense and Sensibility, it just didn't feel like my world at all, and to be so sort of welcomed in and really nurtured and looked after, you know, and I cherish that experience so much. I particularly feel that now, when I think it's very, very, very difficult for young actors to hang on to their identity, to even feel at peace with who they are or who they might be, who they're questioning they might be, what they're becoming, what they're supposed to be. It's very, very difficult for young actors now, much harder than I think it was when I was young. And so I do feel this very protective urge to just to have a sort of a steady hand at their back. It's okay. You're allowed to feel like that. You're allowed to be scared. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to say, this was my idea, and feel brave about suggesting it, because some young actors just feel they don't even have a place to say, oh, actually, I've got a thought. Can I share? You know, and it's really important to me that young actors feel that sense of freedom and collaboration, because that's how it starts, you know, and that's how the confidence grows. And when you're a young actor, and so many young actors aren't trained, and you do learn on the job, and it's a wonderful way to learn, but you have to have a certain degree of confidence to be able to keep going and to feel that you are bringing something to the party. And it's a nice thing for me to feel that I'm able to sort of ignite a little bit of that in the young people that I get to work with a lot. I'm working with a lot of young actors at the moment, and it's really just terrific sort of watching them open up and share their fears. So Sense and Sensibility holds a very special place for me for all of those reasons.
Yeah, it's interesting. I assume, so Emma Thompson was probably the person who got you involved with that, because that was kind of her project, really, right?
It was her project, yeah. Yeah, so it was very much Emma's project, because of course she had written the screenplay, but nobody knew who I was. You know, I was this English actress who'd come out of kind of nowhere, and I had done this New Zealand film called Heavenly Creatures that had had some success at Venice and was starting to make a bit of a noise on the kind of more indie film, sort of cult film circuit. And of course, Peter Jackson had an enormous following. Even in those days, he had quite a specific following. So it was from that I had an English agent, and I then got an American agent from doing Heavenly Creatures. And I guess it was through the little bit of exposure that I had at the time with Heavenly Creatures that made them want to let me audition. And actually I tricked them. So, because, you know, as an actor, you've got to take what you can, you know, what can you get for free? So in this situation, my American agent, Hilda, who I'm still with to this day, she's originally Irish, and she's got a sort of pizzazz and a spiciness to her that I just love. And she's very, very feisty and very strong. And she said to me, now listen, Ang Lee wants you to go and read for Sense and Sensibility, but the role that they want you to read for is a role called this character called Lucy Steele. It was ended up being played by Imogen Stubbs in the film. It's the role of Lucy Steele. She said, but it's not the more interesting role. And the part that you're perfect for is Marianne Dashwood, okay? It's the sister. And they said, but she said, I think they'd be worried about the age gap between yourself and Emma, because Emma's about 16 years older than me. So my agent said to me, listen, just learn the Lucy Steele scenes, but prepare 2 other scenes for the Marianne character, and just go in there and just pretend you were given the wrong information. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. So I did. So I went in and I met with Lindsay Duran, the producer. That was the person I initially met with, then a casting director who I forget who that was actually. And it was in Los Angeles, I think. I must have been doing some press for Heavenly Creatures or something. And so I walked into the room, very nervous, very, very nervous. Auditions are nerve-wracking, you know. Yeah. So I sat down, and Lindsay Duran was like, oh, you know, so it's, you know, very nice to meet you, and, you know, I saw your movie Heavenly Creatures, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm an actor that's in a movie and people are talking about it, and I was still very much in that stage. I said, so do you like the script? And I went, well, the character of Marianne, I mean, I just felt such an immediate sort of kinship with her, and I can see her thinking, oh shit, she's been given the wrong scenes. And I said, so would you like me to read? And she said, yeah, I mean, I think there's some confusion. I think, sure, of course. So I just went right in there with my Marianne Dashwood scenes. And then I flew home to London, and it was a couple of weeks later, and my agent phoned, they want you to go in and meet with Emma Thompson and Ang Lee. Oh my goodness. So then I knew this was a big deal, and I was so terrified, shaking. I thought I was going to be sick. And I remember going in, and I even remember what I wore. It was a sort of a long sleeve, very simple blue top. I was quite thin in those days, and I do remember feeling freezing cold and wishing I had a jacket or something, because we had the audition in an old church somewhere in North London. And Emma was there, and she could not have been nicer to me. And she said, I said, underneath my jumper, I'm wearing a T-shirt actually that's quite similar to your blue top. I tell you what, so she took off her jumper and she said, yeah, she said, now our skin tone, we match a bit more. And I'll never forget her doing that, because I thought it was, I don't know, it definitely relaxed me, you know. And I'm sure that there was a part of her that was thinking, I'm going to get this young actress to relax. All the things that I know in myself, I'm now passing along and doing too. And we read some scenes together, and they sort of kept me waiting for probably about a month. And then I received a phone call to say that I had been given the part. And yeah, amazing experiences I've had. And, you know, that thing of auditioning, just to sort of digress slightly, it's such an important part of the natural progression of growing self-esteem for an actor, which now seems to be formed so much sort of, this is COVID aside, but so much of auditions these days are self-tapes. And so a director or a casting director, and I know this because my daughter is actually acting now, and so she's very much in this position. So she'll do self-tapes, and I'll do them with her, or whoever's kind of around and can help her. And it's nerve-wracking because there's nothing, you don't have a casting director in the room saying, that was good, but try this, or maybe be quieter, or maybe be more of this thing. You know, so there's no real connection and feedback. And that feeling of overcoming your nerves, walking in a door, meeting a room full of strangers, knowing that you would do anything to get that part. It's a very important part of confidence building and understanding yourself, knowing how to cope. You know, fear is a great thing because it teaches you how to cope in a way, especially when you're an actor. And it's hard for young actors now because they sort of are missing that bit. So just basic coping strategies and how to compose yourself and, you know, take that deep breath, keep it together, go into an audition room and give it your all without appearing desperate, you know. It's a tricky balance. So I feel for young actors these days. I really do. Anyway, I've just waffled on. I'm sorry.
No, I love it, because you're talking about young actors, and, you know, it's like, you know, in the context of, say, Heavenly Creatures and Sense and Sensibility, they're two such radically different projects. And, you know, just sort of thinking about them, thinking about how young you were then. I love that you've been talking about young people, because it's kind of great. But, you know, Heavenly Creatures was a brilliant, amazing film. We showed it at Mill Valley, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was just, you know, shocking and astounding and wonderful. And then you get Sense and Sensibility, which has sort of the nurturance of Jane Austen and you know, that whole thing. Such radically different projects. But the Heavenly Creatures thing made me think about choices that you make, and whether having those radical differences early in your career meant that you realized that you could actually approach a really broad spectrum of choices. Did that make a difference to you, do you think? Or
well, I think when it's really interesting to hear you use the word choice, because of course I am so blessed to choose. Right. But of course, in those days, you know, I mean, I would have chosen to do a commercial for baked beans. You know, I mean, it's, you know, it wasn't about choice. It was about whatever great thing comes along, whatever job you can get, you know, just do it, take it. You know, it's all experience, it's all learning. And that's when I use the word luck very often, because it was luck that Peter Jackson auditioned me for Heavenly Creatures. It was luck that the film ended up being great. It was luck that Ang Lee saw Heavenly Creatures and I managed to con my way into auditioning for Marianne Dashwood. You know, these were strokes of pure luck, and, you know, sure, it's what you make of that moment. But you know, I have been incredibly blessed, because I had extraordinary opportunities playing, leading, supporting roles right out of the gate. You know, some actors, I think about people like Brie Larson, and I've listened to her talk about this in roundtables, you know, she was almost giving up acting. You know, some actors will just play the best friend or the neighbor or the, you know, the sister of, for years and years and years, and be in things that never even see the light of day. And it can be unbelievably disheartening and damaging to the soul. And that's where I have been so blessed. I was in things that were good early on, and I just learned this steady work ethic from the people that I was exposed to, and I was able to make the most of that. And then it was really after Titanic that then I feel I could start to use that word choice, because then it more became about, you know, how did I want to conduct myself as an actress, and how was I going to achieve maximum longevity? And I love my job, and I always want to love it, and I always want to be doing it. And I feel so fortunate to this day that I still can and am, and keep getting invited back. You know, you're only as good as your last gig, as my dad would always tell me, and I still really do believe that. But it was after Titanic that choice started to make an impact. And it's an interesting thing now that I have so many years of reflection, and I can look back on that time. And, you know, I wasn't ready to be famous in myself. And also I wasn't ready to be super exposed as an actress either. I still had a lot of things to learn. I turned 21 on that film, and Leo turned 22. Crazy. He had done a lot more work than me, but I still really felt, you know, I'll be honest, there was that moment where this sort of tidal wave of big opportunities and big offers came in, both creative and financial, which were completely overwhelming to me. And of course, on the one hand, you know, there are agents and sort of well-meaning individuals in my life going, oh my God, this is it, this is the moment, jump on it. And I just thought, actually, I'm a bit scared. I'm still figuring out me, you know, and let alone feeling ready enough to be a lead female in big budget films. I just knew that I wasn't ready. Somehow I had that instinct. And I think because I'd grown up in a family, my dad was an actor, my older sister was making rumblings about also wanting to act as well. And on my mother's side, even though she never actually acted, her parents were both actors as well, and she had a brother who was an actor. So it was kind of around me, but everyone was impoverished and only ever doing it for the love of it, you know, lucky to get a theatre gig, you know, in rep somewhere in Bristol if, you know, if it came along. And so I only ever did it for the love of it. I was never driven by anything else, really never driven at all by anything else. And so actually being able to have the strength to say, I'm not ready to do all those big things that have come in as a result of Titanic. Not that I'm not grateful, but I just don't want to get it wrong. I always want to be doing this job. And so I was then able to have the courage to say, I'm going to go and do this film called Hideous Kinky in Morocco. And I loved that book and I had a real connection with that book and with that character. And I was the right age and that felt right to me. And I wanted to see the world. I was young. I knew I wanted to travel. And so there was a part of me that realized too that I was getting a kind of a 2 for the price of 1 experience. Oh my God, go to Marrakesh. Wow, God, amazing. But in this kind of protected way, being with a film crew and wonderful, you know, artists. And the same goes for then Holy Smoke. I mean, obviously, I was never going to turn down the opportunity to work with Jane Campion and Harvey Keitel. But again, this same thing of, I went to India, I did prep in India, I went to Delhi, I went to Rishikesh at the foothills of the Himalayas. I mean, I was exposed to such wonderful life-building, life-enhancing experiences very, very early on. And I'm so grateful for that, you know, more than anything, was that I was exposed to, you know, such rich opportunities in terms of the roles I was asked to play, but the experiences and the people that came hand in hand with them are definitely things that gave me, you know, real strength, real grounding, real belief in myself. You know, and even though that wavers, and it still wavers today, you know, we're only human, but it definitely helped solidify some of those things that I was saying earlier are very hard for young actors, I think, to really hang on to.
Yeah, I have a question here actually that I think you've pretty much answered in what you've just been saying, but it's from Lucia, who's a young actor in London. And she says, how do you know when a project is right? And have you always had that sense, or have you learned to listen to your instinct over your career?
Well, Lucia, you know, I have always listened to my instinct. And sometimes people have thought I'm crazy. But I have always listened to my instincts, and I'll tell you exactly why. When the chips are down, if something's shit and I have a bad time and the film is awful, then I've only got myself to blame. And I'd rather be self-sufficient in that way and resilient and go, well, you know, you live and learn. So I've always had quite instinctive reactions to things. And sometimes I can even get a feeling before opening a script. It's a very strange thing. And it's not some kind of magic that I have. It's just what I've always done. I'll get like, ooh. And it really is like a kind of a buzz. I'm like, ooh, yeah, I've got a feeling about that one. And then 9 times out of 10, it will be a thing that I then end up taking part in.
So interesting. Yeah, I find
it is interesting.
Thing with films, you know, it's really odd, you know, as a film curator, sometimes you just sort of get something and you can't even quite tell what it is. I mean, it's like Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink. You know, there's that sort of informed intuition, but it's really weird how sometimes you just know. It's great.
Yeah. I've just relied on that. At the end of the day, just rely on the instinct. For better or worse, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, then there's the path of least regret, right?
Well, precisely, you know, I think it's important if one does have regrets, you know, not just to learn from them, but to, you know, to hold yourself accountable as well. I think that's a big thing. And you know, we live in a time where people are less and less inclined, I think, to hold themselves accountable. And it's a hard thing as well, I think, to learn too. And again, I think that's also partly social media. You know, it's very easy to have an opinion and to just blurt. you know, sometimes quite toxic, caustic words people are putting into the world with their opinions about other people. And,
Right.
you know, they don't ever have to be held accountable, because often these are people who we don't know, or, you know, we have no connection with or relationship with. So there's no conversation, there's no discussion. And I find that quite sad, because it's this, you know, I'm talking about young people so much, but I suppose I'm so acutely aware of it, working with a lot of young people now, as I said before, in this HBO job that I'm doing. But my daughter Mia is about to turn 20, my son's nearly 17. So I'm just keenly aware, and luckily they don't have social media at all.
Wow.
And so, yeah, they don't have anything, nothing.
That is so
nothing.
English.
I don't know if it is. It's very Kate. That's what it is.
Okay, very Kate. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Oh, so it's interesting. You're doing an HBO piece now. You know, just sort of looking at your career, so much of your career is actually cinema, like real, true cinema. I mean, an exception obviously would be Mildred Pierce. Let's go to Mildred for a moment, because that was such a luscious part. And I mean, talk a little bit about taking on a role that had been so iconically played before, and, you know, then in the context of working with Todd Haynes, making something that was really different and quite wonderful.
You know, I like to mix it up. What can I say? You know,
Right.
I never want to play the same role twice. I never want to feel like I'm, you know, using up emotions from a previous character and bringing them into another one. So for me, Mildred was just all brand new. And I hadn't, after The Reader, which was filmed in 2008, and came quite hot on the heels of Revolutionary Road, which was filmed in 2007. And then all of the excitement around both of those films, but then particularly The Reader, it was wonderful, but it was quite a chaotic time. You know, my priority at that point in my life, I was raising two small children. Yeah. And so after the Academy Awards, when I did win for The Reader, I had a massive break and just let my life play out, and was wanting to be as present as I could for my children, of course. So I literally did nothing from after the Academy Awards of 2009 until we started shooting Mildred in 2010, which was like something like 18 months later, I think. And I mean, nothing can ever prepare you for taking on playing Mildred Pierce. But I was definitely hungry to get back to work and sink my teeth into something. And I kind of emotionally needed it as well. I needed really to, you know, like just give myself that feeling of resilience again, and challenge, and being around artists. You know, I had actually been missing it quite a lot. And because I love actors and I love directors, and there's nothing more thrilling than a rehearsal room or a soundstage. You know, it's really a special place to be. And Todd, I mean, I was such a huge fan of Todd's. Yeah. And when he came to me, and he actually came to my apartment in New York where I was living at the time, and he brought episode 2 and 3 and a box of red velvet cupcakes. And we sat down together, talked about Mildred, ate the cakes. And then he left, and I read episodes 2 and 3 and realized that there was literally no way that I could say no to another cupcake from Todd Haynes. And that was it. But it was a very, very intense experience. It was the longest shoot at that point that I had done since Titanic. This one I'm doing now is actually the longest since Titanic now. It's been a very, very long job, 116-day shoot, this one that I'm on at the moment. But so Mildred was, I mean, it was just such a rich, extraordinary character to play, and the emotional journey that she goes on, and it was the first time I'd played a mother with having challenges with a daughter. You know, that mother-daughter conflict, and I wasn't at that point in any way, shape, or form with my own daughter, who was nearly 10 at the time. I hadn't gone through any of that. So I was just having a lovely time, taking it to the park and, painting her nails and, and baking, basically. That was our little life. And so it was fascinating to me to accept that I was actually of an age where I could play a mother who had a daughter who went from age dot right the way through to older Vida age of 18, I think she is. And it was hard. I mean, I'll be honest, it was wonderful, but it was very, very hard. I was in every scene. I mean, they struggled to give me a breather anywhere. And with that volume of dialogue, I mean, I actually remember getting in the car sometimes in the morning and just running my lines, checking everything for the day. And I would sometimes sit there and just say out loud, I can't. And I have a wonderful dialect coach who I've known since Titanic, who happened to be on me on Mildred, and she would look at me and she'd say, Kate, one bite at a time. Of course you can. And I would go, yeah. Okay, yeah, I can. And sometimes as women, you can because you just have to.
Right.
And so I sort of had that thing in me as well. And again, that was kind of helpful in terms of playing Mildred, because that's also who she was. So it's funny how what was happening in my own life was literally being mirrored daily on that shoot. It was utterly extraordinary. In fact, when my own divorce came through and I had to sit in my dressing room on Mildred Pierce and sign on the dotted line, we filmed on the same day the scene when Mildred and Bert get divorced.
Oh my God.
It was bizarre. It was just extraordinary. And I was a wreck, as you would imagine. I was absolutely, and I even said to the crew, forgive me, I might be quite emotional today, but this is what's going on. And they were all just so lovely. But it just happened to line up that way. Isn't that strange?
Well, it is. Stanislavski must have been turning in his grave that you had the lived experience in the moment as opposed to emotional recall.
Well, that's exactly right. And, I am a big believer in that. It's easy as an actor to go, there's a white noise I can hear, make it stop, I can't concentrate. Or there's, there's somebody over there who is sort of distracting me. You just have to sometimes just go, whatever, just use it all, everything. It's like, what can you get for free? If that thing's distracting, well, bring the distraction into the scene. Sometimes you just have to, less fuss means more focus,
Right.
I really have learned that and continue to, and it's a fun way to be, because it just means that nothing kind of phases you. You just go, no, well, just get on with it. That's fine. Okay, well, that's happening. And that actor doesn't quite know their lines. Doesn't matter. We'll just keep going.
Let's talk about Ammonite. What an amazing piece of work. What an unusual project. And it works on so many levels. It's about a woman in history that sure I didn't know about. It's a love story. It's about class. It's amazing. And I'm actually going to ask you one of the questions that I received from somebody who hadn't seen the film yet, but is curious about it, and asks, and this is from Dane, someplace in Northern California, if it's like God's Own Country, Francis Lee places his characters in kind of a raw and earthy, realistic environment, sexually and otherwise. I wonder what struck Kate about not just acting in this film, but with this director.
Well, that's a wonderful question. And actually it was seeing God's Own Country that made me feel, my God, I have to work with that director. And I saw God's Own Country because I knew the script of Ammonite was being sent, and I had not yet seen God's Own Country. And I too felt the same thing, that, that raw, sometimes quite bleak, hard environment that Francis sets his characters in. Francis himself would say that's what life is like for most people. So Francis is a filmmaker who doesn't want to gloss over anything of reality in order to tell a story. And I think part of what drew him to Mary Anning is that actually he's quite a lot like Mary himself, Francis. he's properly working class. I mean, when I say working class, like he literally worked in scrapyards and, you know, building fence posts and, you know, skinning rabbits with his father on a hillside to make money. I mean, he is properly northern working class, was a struggling actor for most of his acting career, riddled with a lot of self-doubt and questioning about whether he should be an actor or not, and then had the courage to become a director, and has only been making films for 4 years. And he's my age, maybe a little bit older than me. I think he's 47, something like that. And that's very admirable, I think, to have the courage to want to tell stories, and to tell the stories that he does in the way that he does, that are completely devout of vanity or fakery of any kind. And Mary Anning, her world was tough. You know, she existed in a patriarchal society, you know, where that level of oppression was absolutely systemic. And she was a brilliant, unrealized human being. If it weren't for Mary, there are scientific things that we know about dinosaurs that we would never otherwise know. I mean, she discovered coprolites, which is fossilized dinosaur feces, and it's because of Mary Anning that we were able to identify what dinosaurs ate. And you know, Mary lived in a world where her findings and her skill and her brilliant brain was literally taken from her or bought from her, to take that woman's story and to give it a place in the way of film. I just thought I just admired his decision to do that. And also to give her a relationship that, in Francis's own words, he felt was worthy of her. He said he didn't feel that it would have been right to give her a relationship with a man, and to somehow find a companion for her that felt balanced, that felt honest. And what I admire the most about Francis as a filmmaker, and particularly his portrayal of queer relationships, same-sex couples, and in the case of Ammonite, a lesbian relationship that isn't hidden. And it isn't a secret, in the sense that wasn't a part of the narrative. And therefore, what that meant for us, Saoirse and I, as actors, was that we could play these people falling in love. And somehow, I think, stepping into the shoes of these two women falling in love with one another felt so safe, because it wasn't hidden and in our story, and there was no hesitation or fear around how we were supposed to play those parts, because that wasn't a part of the narrative. And it just was one of the most joyful experiences of my entire life to learn this and to play those things. And it was absolutely fascinating and wonderful working with Francis Lee. He's completely brilliant. He's an absolute visionary. He's a very, very kind man. He's very grounded. He's very sincere. And as I said, a lot like Mary. So his rhythm, just as a person, was quite similar to Mary's, and that was very helpful to me to just absorb every day. Anyway, that was a very long-winded way of answering Dale's question.
No, it's great, and I think also, you know, there's that sense of landscape that is in this, that is just, you know, it's very elemental and wonderful. I almost feel like Francis Lee is like a queer Thomas Hardy, you know?
Yeah,
Not that kind of
absolutely.
sensibility.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, the desire to really see whether a person is holding their breath or not, you know, to see the backs of the hands, to see the dirt under the fingernails, you know, which was all very much there, you know, and I, one of the things I appreciated when I saw Ammonite, I've only seen it once, but when I saw it, and I look older, you know, I'm getting older. I mean, I'm nearly 45 years old, and to see that embraced and enhanced, actually, in fact, on film and for this part was so wonderful for me. You know, it's very, very easy with an English period film for them to just put a layer of soft fuzziness over everything, and we had none of that. You know, we used very, very little actual light. You know, it was daylight or it was daylight and candles a lot of the time, because of course there wouldn't have been electricity, and that was truly how the film was made, with candles and tinfoil and rocks, and it was very cold and very challenging because of how cold it was. We had short days because of the time of year it was in England, so it just meant that, you know, there was just a lot to get done each day in order to get the tides right, get the wind right. Oh, is it too sunny? Is it, it might rain, not sure. What's that cloud doing? Okay, well, let's just do it anyway. And then if we have to do it again because something goes wrong, or, you know, the pigeons come and poo all over our heads, because that's what it's like. It's a seaside town, Lyme Regis, you know, and there were seagulls and pigeons everywhere. You know, but Frances is very, very good at absolutely taking the elements and taking the landscape and really bringing it into his narrative in wonderful, really unique ways, I think.
Yeah. And I think what you said as well about the sort of these two characters that meet each other in an equal space, essentially. And what you're saying also about his, I'm going to say, courage in letting you be your full 40-something-year-old self on screen is indicative of, I think there's a shift in the way that women's roles are actually being articulated on screen right now.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that, because you know, for me, that's very, very important. You know, I'm getting older. I'm not going to cover that up. That shouldn't be a secret. That shouldn't be something that's hidden. And I felt so proud of the intimate scene with myself and Saoirse, because I'm nearly 20 years older than Saoirse, you know.
Right.
And I've never felt so safe. I've never felt so in myself and strong and proud of my marks, my scars. I've had 3 children, you know. I have to work out that little bit harder if I really want to, you know, if I really want it to be impactful in some way. But actually with Mary, you know, there's a heftiness and a heaviness to her physicality that I had to be very, I had to make sure I was also encapsulating that. So physically there was some stuff I was doing in order to make sure that was the case. But, you know, my body's not the body it was when I was 25. And I'm very, very, very proud of that. And I think it's hard for women to express that and show that without feeling judged, you know, because half the time we are fucking judged, you know. We're horribly judged and scrutinized. And I'm just done with that. I'm done with that time. And I think we have to be moving forward into a new decade that is about women not judging other women, only supporting, you know. It's so rare, isn't it, that you'll see an old friend, you know, who you may not have seen for a while. And as women, you know, we often go, oh, wow, oh my God, you look good. And it's never about anything other than you look thin or you look fit.
Right.
I'm just not doing that anymore. I am so done with that. We've all just got to stop doing that. Just be pleased to see one another and, you know,
great.
Have a cake. You know. But it's a new, you know, I do genuinely feel this sort of a shift in me. Maybe it is something to do with getting older, and perhaps I do feel a bit empowered that I played this character, and it's very much a warts and all type of a role, and I feel proud about that, so I can speak about it in a way that is grounded and sincere. But anyway, there you go.
Last quick question from Veronica. Okay. What roles would you like to be offered to be playing in 30 years' time? It seems like a good segue from what you just said.
The roles I'd like to be offered in 30 years' time. I just hope to still be in the game. I hope to still have my health, you know, and I hope that I'm playing roles that are age appropriate to the age that I will be in 30 years' time. I look forward to that. You know, I look at someone like Susan Sarandon, who is almost the age I will be in 30 years' time, and she she's just divine, you know. She's smart,
Right.
she's funny, she's gorgeous, she's sexy, she's brilliant. She just gets better all the time, you know. And it's a privilege to be around someone like her. I worked with her a couple of years ago. I hope to be like that on Blackbird.
Yeah. Again, we showed National Valley. Yeah,
she played my mother. But I hope to be like that, you know. I hope to be like Susan, like Judi Dench, like Helen Mirren, you know, like Meryl, of course. Everybody wants to be like Meryl. But just still doing it, still being invited back, still having a sense of humor, still knowing the importance of working hard, because it doesn't happen by magic. It really doesn't. And it can be very, very hard. And I just hope I still feel those same things, you know, the love for it, the challenge of it, the fear of it. I hope I still feel those things in 30 years' time.
Well, the love, the challenge, the fear, may it be so. And thank you so much for being with us. And thank you particularly for Ammonite and this beautiful piece of work.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.